Hi everyone, it's Mrs. Bebo. In this video, we're going to take a look at combining operations with linear expressions. So our main goal is how do I combine operations to simplify linear expressions? And that really is what this is about. It's about simplifying. So taking a look at our first slide, we have two examples on this page. So the one on the left says simplify -2, and then in parentheses, we got x plus 3, and then we have the plus 8x on the outside. So the first thing we need to do is get rid of those parentheses. To get rid of those parentheses, we need to distribute. So we're going to use the distributive property to do -2 times x, which would be -2x. I'll bring down my plus sign. -2 times 3 is going to be -6. And then we just have that plus 8x hanging out on the end because we did not distribute to it since it was not inside the parentheses. Then taking a look at my like terms, we have the -2x and we have the 8x. -2 plus 8 is going to be a positive 6, and then we just got to make sure we add our variable to the end of it. And we still have that plus -6, but we're going to rewrite this as just -6 because that is the best way of writing our final answer here. Now for my students, their textbooks ask them to go through after you have simplified the expression to then go and practice factoring. So if you're not sure on factoring, make sure you check out my YouTube video on factoring linear expressions. But essentially what we're going to do is we're going to undo the distributive property for this 6x minus 6. So the GCF between the 6x and the 6 is 6. And then what would be left inside the parentheses would be x minus 1. So that would be my answer in factored form. Most of you are probably just going to have to worry about this step and this being the final answer. But if it does ask you to then go and take another step of writing your answer in factored form, it would look like this right here. All right, so number 2. So simplify -3 and then in parentheses 4x minus 9 plus this 30x. Now, I noticed that I have a negative on the outside, and I'm going to be distributing that. I have a subtraction sign on the inside of my parentheses, so I'm going to write that as plus -9 so that I'm not losing track of that negative. All right, so now distributing, we're going to have -3 times 4x. That will be a -12x. Bring down my plus sign. -3 times -9 is going to be a positive 27. And then we have that 30x, again, just hanging out in the end because we haven't done anything with it yet. Identifying my like terms, we have -12x and a positive 30x. So -12 plus 30 is going to be 18. So this will be 18x. And then we have that plus 27. And that's my final answer because those are not like terms. You cannot combine them. Again, if they do ask you to go further with this question and write your answer in factored form, essentially you're trying to find the GCF of each of those terms. So the GCF between 18x and 27 is going to be 9. So we're going to have a 9 on the outside, and then it will be 2x plus 3 on the inside of the parentheses. So essentially what we did there is we just undid the distributive property. If we were to distribute this out, 9 times 2x would be the 18x, 9 times 3 would be the 27. And so this is my answer in factored form. All right, taking a look at some more examples here. So more fractions now. So just same idea. If you got parentheses, take care of those first. So simplify 3/8x plus 1/2, and then in parentheses 1/4 x minus 2. We need to distribute first to get rid of those parentheses. So we're going to have the 1/2 times the 1/4 x and the 1/2 times the 2. So the 3/8x is still out front. The 1/2 times the 1/4 x will be 1/8 x minus 1/2 times 2 is just 1. And then now we're going to combine our like terms, and this is super nice because these already have a common denominator. So 3/8 plus 1/8 will just be 4/8. And then we just got to make sure our variable's on the end there, minus 1. Anytime you can simplify your fractions, make sure you're simplifying them. So 4/8, that is the same as 1/2. So we got 1/2 x minus 1. And then that's my final answer there. All right, moving on to number 2. So this one is probably the hardest one on this slide because we have a subtracting 1/4 on the outside of those parentheses. So in another video, I explained how that subtracting is indicating that this is actually a -1/4. So my advice, rewrite that right away, just like I have done. And then on the inside of those parentheses, take the time to rewrite that subtraction as adding a negative as well, so that we're not losing track of those negative signs. All right, so distributing, that's going to be our first step to get rid of those parentheses. You need to do that before we can combine like terms. So we have -1/4 times the 2/3 a. So let me go ahead and write out the 5/12 out front because we haven't done anything with that. But the negative 1/4 times the 2/3 is going to be negative 2/12 plus the negative 1/4 times negative 8. Whenever you multiply by what is called a unit fraction, so a unit fraction has a numerator of 1, it's essentially you are just dividing by the denominator. So 1/4 times 8 is the same thing as 8 divided by 4. And this is going to be a positive 2 because a negative times a negative is a positive. So very similar to the last question, it's super nice because we already have our like terms with a common denominator. So 5/12 plus negative 2/12 will be 3/12. And we just have this plus 2 hanging out. And then we just need to simplify. So 3/12, so you can divide both the numerator and denominator by 3 to get a final answer of 1/4, and then we have that plus 2. All right, and then this last one, again, we have our expression 1/3, and then in parentheses 6x minus 3/4, and then the plus 5x on the end. First step is to distribute. Get rid of those parentheses. So 1/3 times 6x, again, the trick is that you're just dividing. So 1/3 times 6, that's the same thing as 6 divided by 3. So that's going to be 2x minus the 1/3 times the 3/4 now will be 3/12. And then we have this plus 5x. Combining our like terms, we have a positive 2x, we have a positive 5x. 2x plus 5x is going to be 7x. And then we have the 3/12 here. But we do want to simplify that. So 3/12, as we just saw in the previous example, that is the same as 1/4. And then there's my final answer for that question. All right, so taking a look at just one more set of questions here, and then I'm going to have a part 2 video for this concept where we'll take a look at story problems that involve simplifying expressions using a wide variety of operations. So for this first one on the left, it says simplify 2/3 and then in parentheses 18x minus 12, and then we have this minus 6x plus 7. It looks very similar to subtracting linear expressions, except for this is the new piece here, this 2/3 that's on the outside of the parentheses. So that's why they're saying, oh, combining operations, because we have to actually distribute first before we are allowed to subtract these linear expressions. So that's going to be, again, our first step. So we'll do 2/3 times the 18x. Again, you can put a 1 underneath this if it helps. We can do some cross canceling, and then this will turn into just 12x. And then we have this 2/3 times 12. Again, we could put a 1 underneath here. Let me erase this so we can actually see it. We're going to do some cross canceling between this 3 and the 12. This will make it a 4 here. And so this will be minus 8. So we're going to have 12x minus 8 after we distribute that 2/3. And then we have minus, and then parentheses 6x plus 7. So the trick now with subtracting these linear expressions, we can't just drop the parentheses because it is subtracting that's going on in between these two. The trick was, again, keep, change, change. So if we need a reminder there, so keep, change, change. We're going to keep the first expression exactly the same. We're going to change the subtraction to addition, and then change the second linear expression to the opposite. So the opposite of 6x would be a negative 6x. The opposite of adding 7 would be to subtract 7. And then now at this point, we could ignore those parentheses. I'm just going to go ahead and write that as a plus negative 8 though. And then, again, minus 7, I'll write that as plus negative 7. Now we just combine like terms. So 12x and the negative 6x, and then we have a negative 8 and a negative 7. Our variable terms are going to combine to make 6x. The negative 8 and the negative 7 is going to make negative 15. And again, we're just going to clean that up and write it as 6x minus 15. Now this one had a follow-up question, write your answer in factored form. So as a reminder, you're just looking for, again, the GCF of both of those terms. In this case, it's going to be 3, and we'll be left with a 2x minus 5 on the inside of those parentheses. So essentially 3 times the 2x, that was the 6x, the 3 times the 5 was the 15. So that's my answer in factored form. Again, most of you are probably having a textbook or a teacher that's telling you, leave it at that step. Don't worry about the factoring. All right, so for number 2, simplifying negative 2/5 and then in parentheses 25x minus 45, plus we got the 16x minus 6 in the second set. So very similar to the last question, we need to distribute first. So that's what our first step is going to be. I do notice here that I have a subtracting on the inside and I'm distributing a negative. So I'm going to write that as plus negative. And then with this one, I'll actually write out our steps just so we can hopefully see that cross-canceling a little bit easier this time, especially since we have some larger numbers. So we got negative 2/5 that we're going to multiply by this 25x. I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 underneath. Plus we have this negative 2/5 multiplied by the negative 45 over 1. And we just have that 16x minus 6 just hanging out in the end for now. So I can do some cross canceling here between this 5 and the 25. This is 5, this is 1. Here I can cross cancel. This would be a 9, this would be a 1. So negative 2 times 5, that's going to be a negative 10, and we just don't want to forget our variable, so that'll be negative 10x plus the negative 2 times 9, negative 9, excuse me. I almost forgot that negative right there. So negative 2 times negative 9, that's going to be a positive 18. And then we have this plus 16x and then minus 6 inside those parentheses there. So now we're just adding these two linear expressions. So as a reminder, since it's adding, we could just drop those parentheses. You don't have to worry about the keep, change. That's only if you were subtracting the two. So I can just think of this as negative 10x plus 18 plus 16x, and then I'm going to write that as plus negative 6, so I don't forget that negative sign there. And combining like terms, we have our negative 10x and our 16x. We have our 18 and that negative 6. So negative 10x plus 16x is going to make 6x. Plus, we'll have 18 plus negative 6, so that'll be 12. And then that's my final simplified expression there. And then if we were to write this in factored form, the GCF between the 6x and the 12 is 6. And then we're left with x plus 2 on the inside of those parentheses. Again, just undoing that distributive property. All right, so that's it for this video. Make sure you check out part 2 for some story problems that involve combining operations with linear expressions. Thanks for watching.